Right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming. Of course, I'm Chris Logsdon, president of the Allegany Museum's Board of Directors. And on behalf of the board, we're so pleased to welcome you here for the opening and dedication of our newest exhibit, Voices and Votes, Democracy in America. For some opening remarks, it's a pleasure to welcome the mayor of the city of Cumberland and a member of our board, the Honorable Ray Morris. Oh, I don't know if Ray's here. I can always welcome you to Cumberland, but it won't mean as much. Well, until Ray does get here, we might as well keep moving then. We're very lucky to have a trustee of the Maryland Humanities with us and actually a local community steward and dedicated volunteer, Mary Kay Finan.
Okay. Sorry. Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Chris, for welcoming me. I am Mary Kay Finan, and I had the pleasure of serving on the board of directors of Maryland Humanities since 2015. I'm going to take this off so my glasses don't fog up. I am joined today by a fellow board member, Dr. Ron Nauchek, and a past board member, Al Feldstein, who actually has made a significant contribution to this exhibit. Thank you. Also here today, Teresa Warden, who's Maryland Humanities Program Officer, and she is the one who has worked with you to make this all happen. I'm thrilled to see all of you here this morning. Some of you I haven't seen in a very long time, so I'm happy to see you in person. And I'm thrilled to be here for this special celebration of the Smithsonian exhibit, Voices and Votes, Democracy in America. Everyone involved in Maryland Humanities, whether on the board or staff, is passionate about making the humanities part of people's everyday lives. This morning's gathering and this exhibition exemplify how we do this work. Programs like this one, our Museum on Main Street partnership with the Smithsonian, use humanities to explore our ideas, our stories, our values, to foster understanding among people with diverse perspectives, and to strengthen our ability to interact meaningfully with one another. As a statewide nonprofit, we love how Voices and Votes employs history, artifacts, and first-person stories to examine civic and electoral participation. We know that Maryland has many stories to explore, and they connect to the exhibit themes. I hope you will, in addition to the Smithsonian exhibition here, you'll be able to experience the companion exhibits both here and at Frostburg State University that put our experiences front and center. The communities in Maryland to host Voices and Votes, including ours, were selected through a competitive process, and each town develops public humanity programs that reflect the unique history and culture of their individual community. And so it was a lot of work, and it isn't luck that we got it. It was the hard work paid off. While Voices and Votes is a part of a national effort, the real power of the program is how towns come together to form new collaborations and celebrate their local histories at their community museums, libraries, parks, and even in the streets. Here in Cumberland, an enthusiastic team of partners has been working for nearly a year, maybe more, to plan the exhibits and activities for you. Maryland Humanities does its best when we partner with individuals and institutions that help us highlight all the humanities that brings us to our lives. I want to thank an incredible team here at the museum with the partners of Frostburg State University and Allegheny College who are contributing to this exciting 6-week exhibition. Their dedication and enthusiasm in working on this project was clear to all of us at Maryland Humanities, and the result of their hard work is evident here today. I want to be sure to thank our funders who make both the Museum on Main Street and all of our work possible, including the National Endowment for Humanities, the state of Maryland, private businesses and foundations, and hundreds of committed individuals from all across Maryland. In addition, we are grateful to Maryland Public Television for their generous media sponsorship. I urge you to explore all of the exhibitions that are part of Museum on Main Street here in Allegheny County over the next 6 weeks. Join in the programs and workshops, hear your neighbors' stories, engage in discussions about the many dimensions of civic engagement on display. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Kay, and a special thanks, of course, to Maryland Humanities for making this exhibit possible through grant funding. Of course, we are an entirely nonprofit and volunteer-based museum, and so the ability to partner with organizations like Maryland Humanities is absolutely essential to our continued function. In addition to Maryland Humanities, as Mary Kay mentioned, this exhibit simply would not be possible without volunteers here at the museum, both to engage in the organization and the setup of the exhibit itself. And at this time, I'm happy to recognize several members of the committee here at the museum that made this possible, including board members Clara Short, Joe George, Derek Miller, Vic Resendez, and Ann Townsell, as well as all those here at the museum who made this possible. We've also been very lucky to work with a number of co-sponsors and organizations on this project, including the Allegheny College of Maryland, the Allegheny County Women's Commission, the Women's Civic Club, the local chapter of our NAACP, the Allegheny County Republican Women's Club, which has volunteered to serve as docents for this important exhibit, and not the least of which, Frostburg State University, which has been absolutely indispensable in gathering information and filming the videos that you'll see as virtual components to this exhibit. I'd especially like to recognize Leah Messman-Mandicott and Lisa Zakharova for their work on this. It's my pleasure to recognize and to ask to join us Dr. Ron Nauchek, President of Frostburg State University.
Thank you. And let me offer my congratulations on this wonderful exhibit. Frostburg State University and our Lewis J. Ort Library are very proud to be partnering with the Allegany Museum and the Maryland Humanities. Frostburg State University, as you may know, takes great pride in its commitment to civic engagement and voting. We continue to be cited as one of the leading universities in terms of student voting participation. And again, we're cited as a voter-friendly campus. FSU was recognized by the Washington Center a few years ago as a public university for civic engagement. And our student government received an award this year from the Campus Compact Mid-Atlantic for its role in civic engagement. I'm very proud, Vic, thank you for showing me just before this started, the fact that two of our students are featured and will be featured in the traveling exhibit in their comments about the importance of civic engagement and voting. And certainly Western Maryland has a lot to be proud of. The Frostburg State University companion exhibit, which I hope you'll be able to visit, located on the main floor of the Ort Library, honors 5 of our civic leaders. U.S. Senators J. Glenn Bell Sr. and Jr., Speaker of the House, the Maryland House of Delegates, Cass Taylor, State Senator and my neighbor, John Bembackis, and Lucille Roeder, the first woman to serve on the Cumberland City Council and as a county commissioner. During these times when citizenship and civic engagement is under so much scrutiny and debate, initiatives such as the Maryland Humanities Museum on Main Street with exhibits like this remind us of the importance of civic responsibility. I will tell you as a president and an individual who grew up in the 60s, the student activism we're seeing is reminding me of what it was when I was a student. I'm on the other side of the desk now as we move forward. In closing, I want to thank FSU's archivist, Lisa Zakharova, FSU's library director, Leah Messman-Mandicott, and the Bell Institute for Public Affairs at FSU, and especially Al and Angela Feldstein for their contributions of artifacts that make this exhibit so special. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Now, as Dr. Nauchek highlighted, the virtual component of this exhibit includes several video exhibition components by students of Frostburg State University who are highlighting their own activism and participation in our democracy. We are fortunate to be joined by 2 of those students today, Jessica Thayer and Max Hancock, both just there. Jessica and Max, if you want to come up really quickly, or and if you'd like to say anything at all.
I just wanted to say thank you all so much for really investing in Western Maryland. I think a lot of times, rural America seems to be left out of the conversation, but there is a lot of engagement and civic activism here to be shown. So we appreciate the opportunity and we thank you for believing in young voices and young votes. So thank you.
Now, I did not know I was going to be asked to speak up here, so I don't have anything prepared that's quite as concise or well phrased, but I would like to second all of the measure of thanks for all of the hard work that all of the people in this room have put into making Western Maryland a better place. As Jessica said, it's easy to neglect the experience of rural folks, particularly the poorest among us, the people of color. But I think this exhibit is a really great example of the way that anyone can be acknowledged for their impact on our democracy, and that's very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica and Max. And I do encourage all of you to check out Jessica and Max's remarks on the video monitors here as part of the exhibit. We are certainly more confident in the future for your participation and activism. Last, but very far from least, it's my pleasure to recognize a longtime friend of the museum and a personal friend as well in Al and Angela Feldstein. The Feldsteins have been so generous in lending their collections to us across time and including in this exhibit. Our community is better for the documentation of our history that the Feldsteins have been so willing to collect on our behalf.
All my wife does is bail me out.
Fair enough, Al. So again, it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure opening and dedicating this exhibit. Of course, while we have you here, this is also an excellent time to highlight some additional changes and advancements we're making.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Lindsay Baker, Executive Director of Maryland Humanities. And like everyone else that was just on the video, I'm thrilled that you are with us today as we celebrate the opening of Voices and Votes, Democracy in America. It is presented under the auspices of Museum on Main Street, a partnership with Smithsonian Institution Traveling Exhibition Services. Voices and Votes is the 7th Museum on Main Street exhibition Maryland Humanities has had the pleasure of presenting in partnership with local cultural organizations and community partners. This is our first time opening during a pandemic and our first virtual opening. Our program this morning kicked off with live welcome remarks made on site at the Allegany Museum in Cumberland, where Voices and Votes will be on view through May 29th. This is the 3rd time Allegany Museum has hosted a Museum on Main Street tour, and we are so honored to continue to partner with them, as well as with Frostburg State University and Allegheny College of Maryland. Now, I am going to disappear, and I am pleased to be able to share with you a video preview of the main exhibition. And just to give you a sense of how this is going to work, I am going to reappear and disappear as video comes on screen. So don't worry, we're still here.
Hello, my name is Robbie Davis. I'm a project director with the Smithsonian's Museum on Main Street program, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here in Cumberland today to introduce you all to the wonderful Voices and Votes, Democracy in America exhibition, which has been brought to the Allegany Museum in cooperation with Maryland Humanities. Museum on Main Street is a special partnership between the Smithsonian and state partners like state humanities councils to bring traveling exhibitions to communities all over the country that are generally smaller in population or are in areas where they're a little bit more isolated. And this gives an opportunity for people everywhere to have a chance to take in Smithsonian scholarship and resources. So we are pleased to be able to deliver this service through our state partners, and it's always a delight to see what our local communities come up with. This is always meant to be a local history and culture opportunity for our host organizations, and they always deliver. And it's impressive to see the exhibitions that they create, the programs they do, and the meaningful contributions they make to their own communities. One of my favorite sections in Voices and Votes looks at kind of the history of campaigning in the United States. And of course, that's something that we're all familiar with. We see great commercials, you know, running on our television screens, and we hear them on the radio every election season. And here in the exhibition, we show you some of the most interesting and unique commercials from televised campaigns over the past 75 years or so. But here in the exhibition, you have a chance to see even more. All of these great examples of campaign posters, and many of these are from contemporary elections, and this wonderful object case here that's got buttons and brochures and bumper stickers and record even, all of those fun things, that memorabilia that we all collect from our favorite candidates and from things that really remind us of our own personal history. We all have a personal experience within each of these campaigns based on what we wanted to do and who we voted for. And it's wonderful to have an opportunity to kind of look back here and think about what those times meant to you. One of the things I love in this exhibition is talking about how people who become naturalized citizens of the United States go through the process of doing an examination as part of that naturalization process. And we all think, okay, I wonder what those questions are really like. Well, we have a sample of some of them here in the exhibition. And they're hard. We think we know them, but the reality is that sometimes you have to stop for a second and really think about it. But I love here, name one U.S. territory. I always go for Guam, but we also have America Samoa and the Northern Marianas Islands, and it's great to know that these are questions that all Americans should know, regardless of their citizenship status. And it's a great opportunity to come in here and be introduced to those questions. One of the most exciting parts of the Museum on Main Street program, in addition to our exhibitions, we also have a great series of programs that reinforce this local history opportunity for our host organizations and our state partners. One of those projects is called Stories from Main Street. Stories from Main Street started 10 years ago in 2011 to focus attention on rural communities across the country and to get stories from those communities into a Smithsonian collection. Over the years, this has developed. We've heard from thousands of people now, and it is always exciting to see that material come in and give the Smithsonian an opportunity to elevate it, to amplify it, use it in our exhibitions, use it in programs like this, which accompanies Voices and Votes. This is a computer kiosk that features stories from people in several states talking about their own experiences with American democracy, the first time they voted, the issues and community involvement opportunities that really get them excited and get them going and getting involved locally. So it's wonderful to have a chance to hear from people all over the place and see just how different our perspectives are, and to really introduce that full diversity into the exhibition itself. We're grateful to Maryland Humanities and the Allegany Museum for inviting us in and having us here over the next several weeks. It's a really exciting time to focus not only on our nation's democratic process, but also on what it means to people living here in Cumberland and throughout Western Maryland.
Here at Maryland Humanities, we embrace lifelong learning, and you're witnessing that in action as we work through our first virtual opening. So thank you for sticking with us. What you just saw was filmed in the Allegany Museum ballroom, where the exhibition is currently on view. I hope you're as eager as I am to get out to see the full exhibit in person. If you plan to visit the Allegany Museum, you can visit Wednesday through Sunday between 1 and 4 p.m. You'll also be able to experience it at one of our 4 additional sites across Maryland through next January, as it tours the state. Maryland Humanities recently participated in a nationwide initiative, Why It Matters, Civic and Electoral Participation. Programming at dozens of state and jurisdictional humanities councils was supported by a grant from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, administered through the Federation of State Humanities Councils. In Maryland, in conjunction with our program, Voices and Votes, we partnered through our Maryland Voices program with the Appeal Center in Baltimore to collect oral histories from young, first-time voters and communities throughout the state who'd be hosting the exhibition. We're now going to share with you 2 short videos of Frostburg State University senior Jessica Thayer, who you just saw on screen at the beginning of the program, responding to the questions, are you hopeful for the future, and does your vote matter? Following the questions, Jessica is going to join us for a few minutes of Q&A. Please enter any questions you may have for her in the Q&A box, which you can access at the bottom center of your screen. I'm going to disappear again, and I think when we come back, Jessica will be on screen with us.
My name is Jessica Thayer. I'm a senior studying law philosophy at Frostburg State University. I'm the vice president of the Student Government Association and the founder and president of our university debate team. I think sometimes the greatest amount of change can literally lie at the community level, starting with having a conversation with your neighbor and reaching out to other people in your community who are in need or who have a difference of opinion than you. And we've been unable to do that because the rate of polarization has sort of made us segregate into our camps, right? It's so easy to just hang around people who agree with you or find a news outlet that will tell you exactly what you want to hear. And that's a major, major problem. I think that with the most recent election, I am hopeful that we can start to move away from polarization and find a more moderate lane. Because at the end of the day, the differences are really not that huge. And political parties are not, the end all be all. American people have a lot in common, and it's pointless to try and divide ourselves into camps and be divisive because nothing will ever get done. So I am really, really hopeful. And I think with, the uptick in young voters and activism, I think we're seeing a lot of issues come to the forefront. And the quicker that those things get addressed, the more prosperous nation that we're going to have. So I really am hopeful that, we can move towards a respectable nation where, we really do care about our fellow citizen. I dream about times, long ago where really that was, the building of democracy and being able to live in a peaceful world while having differences. If we had a democracy full of like-minded people, it would be terrible. Nothing new would ever be created. We would all always agree or always disagree. And nothing would be productive or new or exciting. And people, want to make a democracy this perfect union where there's no disparity, no disagreements, no anger or, mistrust. And I don't think that's how it was meant to be. I think that we are all individual-minded people, and there's something spectacular in how we use those differences to put us together. And compromise is absolutely everything. So I'm really excited to see how the Biden administration works through that in these next couple of years. My name is Jessica Thayer. I'm a senior studying law philosophy at Frostburg State University. I'm the vice president of the Student Government Association and the founder and president of our university debate team. I, had discussed politics with my grandparents for quite a while. And, before I was really old enough to vote, I had just sort of assumed that they voted and that, almost everybody old enough to vote would just go vote because that's their duty. That's what they're meant to do. A few years ago, I discovered that my grandmother wasn't registered to vote. And it sort of just blew me away because, the conversations that we would have about politics and the changes that she wishes to see, it would just stop at the discussion. It's not like any action would result out of that because she didn't go vote. And that really changed my perspective and really reminded me of how far we've came, I think, as a country too. So previously, I think there were a lot of party loyalists who held up, the party line, and you could always count on older voters to come out and go to the polls. And, young voters weren't really seen to be as active. But today's America is really seeing a rise in young voters and young advocates and young activists. And I think, just one notion that really stands out to me is, the transition that we've made from my vote doesn't count to count every single vote. And if there's anything 2020 taught us, it was the power of each and every single one of our votes. Really, if you break it down to the most basic level, that's how you get a majority. If enough people thought, oh, my vote doesn't matter, we would never get a majority. Nothing would ever get passed. It's people, I think, who tell you, oh, your vote doesn't matter, are probably just scared of your vote. And that is all the more reason to get out and go vote. So I am thrilled to see young people getting more active and engaged with politics because, they are the future. And, the sooner we can get involved and the sooner that we can share the concerns that are important to our communities and the goals that we have set for ourselves, the more people will hear us. And I think that it's a really, really awesome time for young Americans right now. And, we're bringing up issues that have needed to be addressed for so many years. And, I think this unsilencing happened, where people are not afraid to speak out and people are not afraid to, really share the hard issues and have the hard conversations that are really, lying at the heart sometimes of our American divide. So I'm really thrilled to see that.
Wow, those are so inspiring. First, I'd like to remind our audience, if you have any questions, submit them through the Q&A function in the center of this bottom of your screen. And now I'm pleased to welcome Jessica Thayer. Thank you for joining us from Cumberland. And thank you for taking part and sharing your personal reflections as a part of Maryland Voices. It's been great to see these videos. I have a few questions for you.
Absolutely.
First, I'm so glad you spoke about your hope for a future where we focus more on what we have in common than our differences. How do you plan to overcome polarization and embrace our commonalities in your life and in your communities?
Absolutely. So I think polarization is an issue that we've seen across the board, whether that just be in our communities from day to day, whether that be in the Supreme Court, whether that be in politics or outside of politics. But, I think I have to remind ourselves of just how we got here, because really we all share a common goal, and that is really just to prosper, to do good, to have safe, loving communities, to have a good, stable job, to have income, to be a good human. And I think those basic notions are what bring us together. The things that we care about that is not based on political leanings or, party ties. Those things really fall to the wayside when you look at what matters. And I think that overcoming polarization really starts with just this acceptance that there is no room for complacency in 2021. You have to have hard conversations. If there's an issue that is lying on your chest, it's time to bring it up. And it's time to talk about it, because there is never a better time than the present. And we have seen the power that our voices have, especially young voters. But I think just starting up those conversations and being okay with being uncomfortable, because the longer that you let it go, the more it's just going to swell up and nothing's ever going to change. So polarization is an absolute major issue. But I think that just those basic conversations, reaching into your community and showing people that you care about them, reaching across party lines because you know that you do have things in common, is going to open up so much more room for commonality than what people would expect.
Being okay with being uncomfortable. If that's not the lesson of 2020, I don't know what is. Thank you. So as I know you just learned this morning, your story is a part of one of several collected in Maryland that's been added to the Voices and Votes exhibit itself in the story kiosk. How does it feel to have your ideas and your perspectives become a part of a Smithsonian project?
I feel so honored, truly. I think each and every person has a different experience, of course, and We all have major life events that shape us into who we are and what our values are. But to be able to share stories, I think, is one of our most powerful gifts as humans, because that is what makes our connections and what allows us to love one another and care for one another. So the more people that you have sharing those stories, the more people you impact. And if my one voice from all the way in the mountains of Western Maryland can reach out and impact somebody and encourage them to go vote, I know that I've made a difference. And that's all that matters, because truly just, it's again, going back to the conversation, letting people know that you may not know everything and it's okay to unlearn. Honestly, sometimes unlearning is better than learning new, but you have to at least be willing to share, be vulnerable, and be open to having that discussion. So I feel very, very honored. And I know that there's so many other great storytellers who all have incredible lessons on civic engagement. And I think that we all really benefit from learning from one another as well.
Thank you, Jessica. This was great. And I don't see any questions in the Q&A. I think everyone is probably very excited about the video and hearing your responses. So thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now we're excited to share with you all in the audience and Jessica a preview of 2 of 3 companion exhibits that our partners have been working on for many months. As a part of Museums on Main Street, there are companion exhibits created in the community. So these are the previews of those. First up is an exhibit of materials documenting 50 years of local protests in Allegheny County from the archive of historian and former Maryland Humanities board member, Angela Feldstein.
Hi, my name is Albert Feldstein, and I'm here to talk a little bit about my collections and photographs. I started going to college in the mid-1960s through 1971. This was an era of exciting social policy change: Vietnam, the environment, Black Power, the women's movement, gay and lesbian rights. I was majoring in political science. I loved history, so I became very interested in these things. Also, at that time, they were giving away buttons, and these were colorful, graphic, psychedelic buttons about all these issues, and either cost a dime or they were free, so I just took them by the handfuls. And that's how I started into the collecting of what I call the cause, social, protest, movement type of buttons. Over the next 50 years, as it pertains to this particular genre, I've kept up that hobby. And I didn't care which side of the issue: pro-gun, gun control, gun rights, pro-choice, pro-life. I wanted to collect both sides because I felt these items, the buttons, the bumper stickers, the posters, the photographs, were the most graphic and colorful visual display of our First Amendment freedoms of speech, assembly, the right to petition the government, even religion. So I kept up with that over the decades, traveling here and there. I have my agents all over the country, relatives, cousins, friends, still collecting for me. But in the past 4, 5, 6 years, I've noticed I don't have to go out of town anymore. There are events, whether it be Back the Blue, George Floyd, Save the Post Office, immigration. These things are happening now regionally, whether it be in Cumberland, Maryland, Frostburg, Maryland, Oakland, McHenry and Garrett County, Allegheny County, Hagerstown and Washington County. So I can just go to these places and get the items. A second component of the collections are what I call my political campaign items: local, state, national. And this goes all the way back to when the first buttons were made, 1896, William Jennings Bryan, William McKinley. And I have collected all the campaign buttons, other materials for each race, particularly the third-party candidates, which I found were very interesting. And that's also was part of my collection. But for purposes here, I wanted to concentrate on the local stuff, the cause issues, or local demonstrations, events, protests, as relate to national public policy. Here's 2 of them I find interesting. This was a Back the Blue rally held in Cumberland in August 2020. And this followed on the heels of several civil rights type marches, things like this. And the community also wanted to show that in addition to that, they wanted to support our local law enforcement officers. So a huge rally, about 400 people, was held downtown Cumberland. And those are pictures from that rally. And I found this one, behind the badge lies a heart. You know, I can only assume possibly that's the daughter of a law enforcement official or something like this. Directly below the Back the Blue rally, like many communities, Allegheny County, we have a lot of school consolidations. Sometimes they go over too big. So this was I'll call it a local protest, protesting the potential consolidation of a couple of our high schools in the county. And this shows students along Georges Creek in Allegheny County protesting the closing of Bruce High School, students who were concerned about Allegheny High School being closed. And I like this because, once again, it's not national, but it's local. And once again, it reinforces our First Amendment of free speech, the right to petition the government and assembly. Standing off to my right is my wife, Angela, just celebrated our 40th anniversary. On our very first date, I took her down to what was known as the Smithsonian Museum of History and Technology. Now it's the Museum of American History, because I wanted to show her some buttons I had in there. Well, when I came out, lo and behold, right on the front doorstep was the first National March for Lesbian and Gay Rights. I believe it was October '79. And here were all these guys, beautiful white shirts, blue jeans, and there was a Los Angeles Gay Freedom Marching Band, guy with a big snare drum. And I have pictures of this. And they had on these buttons. And I said, I need that button, sir. And he said, well, our maraca or marimba or one of those instruments where you shake, our maraca player hasn't shown up. And he said, if you can march with us to the Washington Monument 2 blocks away, I'll give you this button. And I said, well, wait, let me tell my, and all of a sudden somebody blows a whistle, so they start marching. I grab the 2 shakers and I'm marching down with them. And my wife on our first date sees me. And she said, what are you doing? She's running along with me. You're supposed to be here with me. And I said, well, I can get a date with you anytime, but I need this button. And she ended up marrying me anyway. Anyway, that's how I started collecting the excitement, the thrills, the history, the graphic representation of all these events. Thank you.
I was so engaged with that story and imagining myself on that first date. I love that. And it's the type of thing you would never experience if you just went to see the exhibit. So I'm so thankful we were able to hear that story. The exhibit that Al shared interesting facts on is on view through May 29th. I want to acknowledge that 2 of the speakers at the beginning of this program, Mary Kay Finan and Ron Nauchek, both are current members of the Maryland Humanities Board of Directors, and they have deep ties to Frostburg State University. Mary Kay is a professor emerita, and Ron, of course, is the current president of the university. There is also a 3rd local companion exhibit created by Allegheny College of Maryland and on view at the Allegany Museum for you to check out when you visit Cumberland, because we know you will, called Finishing Her Story, Women's Suffrage in Allegheny County.
My name is Lisa Zaharva, and I'm the Special Collections Librarian Archivist here at Louis J. Ort Library at FSU. I'm also the curator for FSU's companion exhibit, Western Maryland Voices in Public Service, where we are showcasing and honoring several local notable political leaders. The welcome to our exhibit is a man who needs no introductions. Mr. Steele, he was the 7th Lieutenant Governor with Bob Ehrlich from 2003 to 2007. And he's overseeing a collection of local political ads and campaign signs from the Albert and Angela Feldstein collection. Around the corner, we have 4 exhibits honoring our local political leaders. The first is John Bembackis. Mr. Bembackis graduated from Frostburg State College in 1970 after he served in the Vietnam War. So he was a state senator for 2 terms and went on to become mayor of Frostburg for 4 terms from 1994 to 2002. One of Mr. Bembackis' greatest accomplishments was establishing Frostburg State University from its prior designation as Frostburg State College and integrating it to the University of Maryland system. So next, we have Mr. Casper R Taylor. So Cass Taylor, he was instrumental in Western Maryland. He served in the Maryland House of Delegates from 1975 and went on to become Speaker of the House from 1994 to 2002. He accomplished a great deal for Western Maryland during his decades of service, including creating the Rocky Gap Lodge and Resort. And he extended I-68 so that it reached all of Western Maryland. And he authored the One Maryland Bill, which helped economically depressed regions of the state. And then we have Miss Lucille Wilcox Rader. So Miss Rader is a pioneer in Western Maryland. She became elected in the Cumberland City Council in 1950. She was the first woman to be elected. And then she went on to become the first woman county commissioner in 1966. In her 20+ years of service to the area, she was involved in many local improvements, including the construction of education buildings, ACM, the new county jail, new regional health center. And after she retired from public office, she concentrated on local environmental issues. We have an exhibit dedicated to J. Glenn Bell Sr. and J. Glenn Bell Jr. So they both represented Maryland as US senators. So the father and son senators, they were only 2 out of 3 US senators from Western Maryland. J. Glenn Bell Sr. served 2 terms from 1953 to 1965, and J. Glenn Bell Jr. served from 1971 to 1977. One of Bell Jr.'s biggest accomplishments was the establishment of the C&O Canal as a National Historic Park and Canal Place in downtown Cumberland as a state park. And in 2002, Bell Jr., he funded the creation of the J. Glenn Bell Archives, which houses many of the political exhibits here on display. I welcome you to Frostburg State University and the library, and I hope you can check out our companion exhibits. They will be on display through the month of May.
The first exhibit you all viewed is actually at the Allegany Museum, open now through May 29th. And the second exhibit that we just saw is at the Louis J. Ort Library on the campus of Frostburg State University. That is also on exhibit through May 29th. And just to reiterate, there's a third local companion exhibit created by Allegheny College of Maryland and on view at the Allegany Museum called Finishing Her Story, Women's Suffrage in Allegheny County. So there are 3 companion exhibits for you to visit when you go out. Now, we have 2 additional short videos from our Maryland Voices effort to document oral histories from local young voters. These show Frostburg State University student Max Hancock, who you heard from earlier, responding to the questions, what would you say to someone with an opposing viewpoint? And how would you create dialogue to come together on an issue? And what do you think it means to be American? Following his videos, Max is going to join us on screen for a few minutes of Q&A. Again, if you have any questions that you would like me to ask Max, just enter them into the Q&A box at the bottom middle of your screen.
Hi, my name is Max Hancock. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm from the Annapolis region of Maryland, but when I moved off to college, it was to Frostburg. when it comes to people on the other side of the fence, people put up a lot of fences. People think that there's these divides between rural and urban, between gay and straight, between genders even. Specifically between genders really gets me every time. But the divides that I think actually influence most of politics, most relationships, and most conflicts in modern society are wealth-based. They're class divides. They're the different tiers of neighborhood quality. They're the ways that people grow up with too much or too little and never consider what it's like to be on the other side of that fence. So I think there's a lot of groups who would consider themselves, my foe, I guess you could say, just because I lean towards the bleeding heart liberal side of things sometimes. But to them, I would have to say, we share experiences. No matter how different we are, we share more experiences than you would ever know, just by virtue of being people just trying to hang on financially. People who sometimes are afraid to spend money, who's hyper aware of every dollar in their bank account. And I think that unifies us more than hardly anything else ever does, because it's being afraid of not having enough money is so universal. I don't know how I could communicate that without just a huge amount of context and without diving deep into the most inaccessible theory and literature that no one really wants to read. But I think unity is so important, and class unity is something that you can't get enough of when you're living in a society where some people have made billions, millions of dollars in the time that we've been sitting here. It hurts sometimes that people can't see that the struggles that we face as a country are colorblind, they're gender blind when it comes to some of these issues, not all of them. I guess I said that wrong. Obviously, being a person of color or being gender nonconforming makes things harder, but there's something damn scary about being poor regardless. Hi, my name is Max Hancock. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm from the Annapolis region of Maryland, but when I moved off to college, it was to Frostburg. I don't think I believe in American as an adjective, because there's I mean, this is going to sound crazy, but there's a lot of people in this country, and there's this huge spectrum of intent and just beliefs from every possible culture and every possible point of view. I think there's an assumption that American is going to be synonymous with patriotic, kind of wholesome, kind of meaty, like hamburgers and the 4th of July. But I don't think hamburgers even were invented in America, first of all. I know there's that saying, as American as apple pie. The first literary reference to apple pie was by Geoffrey Chaucer. So, like, I don't think it's a very good expression. That's not really the point. I think people want to believe that America is symbolic of freedom and justice. But in reality, when you look at the history of America and the history of the movements that have defined America, it's more of a country defined by underdog stories. America is a country of underdog stories, but they're not always the underdog that you want to succeed. We love a good underdog story. We love thinking, oh, this little guy rose up and became the best out of everyone else just by pulling himself up by his bootstraps. But sometimes the underdog is like super racist. Sometimes the underdog is a guy that I'm not comfortable walking past a statue of every day on my way to English class or whatever. So I would say that America is a concept in name only. When you really look at America, there's a lot going on that you couldn't even begin to define in less than an essay. I think that diversity is really important to America. I think it's one of the things that makes America so interesting culturally, but it's also one of the things that makes America so chaotic all the time. It seems like we have the weirdest political atmosphere at any given point. And it's because there's no such thing as being American.
Hi, Max. Thank you for joining us. And I want to remind everyone again to put their questions in the Q&A. And welcome you, Max, for joining us live from Allegany Museum this morning. And thank you for taking part and sharing your story as a part of Maryland Voices.
Oh, no, thank you for having me. This is a huge honor.
I have a few questions for you first to give our audience time to think of theirs if they have any. I found your assessment about how the class divide and economic disparities underpin so many of the conflicts in our country very interesting. Do you see a way forward towards bridging that divide or overcoming it for your generation?
I think my generation is ahead of the curve when it comes to solving these issues, because the first step in creating a huge societal change like that is changing the attitudes of the people it's affecting. And we're already seeing this shift in paradigm where people are beginning to understand that sometimes you need to completely reject a system if it doesn't actively benefit you. My generation, I think, is increasingly becoming unafraid to destroy the institutions that we've seen fail throughout our entire lives. I was born in 2001. I have never been alive in a time without some ridiculous economic flop going on. And I think eventually it's going to come to a tipping point where the youngest people in the country who grew up already distrusting these systems that everyone else is taking as gospel, we are going to wake up one day and say, we're not going to continue to have this. I genuinely believe that because of this shift in attitudes, we are going to see a huge change in the way that the country approaches economics, probably within the next 10 to 15 years, where once people in my generation, Gen Z, start taking the political floor, we're going to see a lot more communally based economic policies, a lot more things that I think I'm not going to say outright socialism,
However, I think that's the lean that a lot of people in my generation have. And that's gonna not necessarily solve all the problems that we're seeing, but it is going to change the playing field somewhat, hopefully in a more equal direction.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that your insights and your perspectives are so interesting to have in context of 2020 and hearing from younger voices. So I'm very thankful you're able to share that. And now I have a question that I also asked Jessica. How does it feel to have your story become a part of the Smithsonian traveling exhibition that will be seen in the next few years across Maryland and across the country?
I believe our internet connection is a little bit unstable, which is understandable. It is Western Maryland. So let me know if at any point if you're having trouble hearing me, all right?
Okay, perfect.
So okay, cool. So it feels like it's both an honor and a huge responsibility to have my voice put out there at such a young age. I think I'm going to go into economics. I don't know for certain. I could end up anywhere else in the next couple decades of my life. And wherever I am, geographically or emotionally or politically, this record of my testimony is always going to exist, no matter what. People are going to be able to access it whenever and wherever. And that's daunting. I gave this interview about 2.5 months ago. I had only been on hormone replacement therapy for maybe 1.5 months at that point. So looking back at the video and seeing someone who is so feminine and so with such a high-pitched voice and with such different mannerisms than I do now, it's strange to have this testimony associated with me when I barely even recognize that guy. Seeing how culture treats people who have slipped up in the past, I hope that this interview ages well, because if I go into politics, this is going to get dredged up eventually, and who knows how that's going to turn out. But I can't help but also at the same time feel like an incredible, like it's such a privilege. It's, I think, amazing to be memorialized in this way. Well, not memorialized, obviously, because I'm not dead, but the words on the tip of my tongue. This is going to be around forever. I'm going to be a primary source. That's what it's called. I'm going to be a primary source. That's so cool. Everyone else in the room is laughing at me right now because I'm just tripping over words like that. But there's obviously a lot of fear there, a lot of enthusiasm too.
Well, yes, primary sources are great, and it ages you a bit once you realize that you are a primary source. So congratulations, welcome.
Boy, thank you.
And I will say, I think that your perspective on where you are right now and where you were a couple of months ago, I am very thankful for you for sharing that piece with us. I think that's important. And your willingness to go on camera, knowing that you may be different in a few years and knowing that it could come up if you go into politics or, I think that you're young enough to realize it will come up if you go into politics. So that awareness, I think, is so interesting, especially I'm older. I'm not, a generation that didn't have computers when we were little, but we're still learning how to adjust to realizing that these records never go away and they don't always age well. So thank you for taking that risk with us and going on record and being a part of this story that's going to travel the country. Thank you.
No, it's very exciting. Again, I really appreciate the opportunity, no matter where this opportunity takes me.
Well, I look forward to seeing where the world takes you in the years, and I don't see any questions in the Q&A, so I just want to say thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Have a good day. Next, I want to thank our partners without whom there simply would not be a Museum on Main Street program. Vic Resendez, Joe George, Clara Porcello, and their colleagues at the Allegany Museum, Lisa Zerhava and Lee Messman-Mandicott, and their colleagues at Frostburg State University, and Sherry Snyder and her colleagues at Allegheny College of Maryland. I also want to thank Carol Harsh, Robbie Davis, and their colleagues at the Smithsonian. And I want to be sure to recognize and thank our Maryland Humanities Program Officer, Teresa Warden, whose leadership, vision, and tireless labor makes Museum on Main Street the incredibly effective and impactful program that it is. And a special thank you to Erin Heinzman and Susan Millard, who have been doing work behind the scenes to make this virtual and in-person program and event a success. And thank you to the rest of the Maryland Humanities staff who execute events like this today with grace and patience. And thank you all for sticking with us as we work through it. Finally, I want to thank Maryland Public Television for once again being our generous media sponsor for Museum on Main Street. And while these final slides play with additional information, including the 4 additional communities where voices and votes will travel to next in Maryland, I urge you, because that's my job, to consider making a donation to support our work both online and in communities throughout the state. You can give directly at donatemdhumanities.org. Again, I'm Lindsay Baker, Executive Director of Maryland Humanities. Thank you again for joining us today. And I urge you to experience Voices and Votes, Democracy in Action in person when you're vaccinated and ready to venture out safely. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Bye.